What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with another video. I've been taking a little bit of a break. I've been kind of inconsistent with my content, but now that football is really picking back up and we just saw the first preseason game for the Buffalo Bills, I'm definitely going to be getting right back into the swing of things. Although it didn't mean anything, it felt really good to see football back on our televisions. It felt really good to see our Buffalo Bills back on screen. And in ever so exciting preseason fashion, the Buffalo Bills end up taking down the Indianapolis Colts in their first preseason game, 27-24, a 14-point comeback and a game-winning field goal kicked by Tyler Bass. It was one hell of a second half, thus making for our 9th straight preseason victory. That game was a drag to watch to begin with. The offense was completely dead. There was no energy, no rhythm, no sync. But at least when the second half rolled around, there was actually some action to indulge in as far as the offensive side of the ball goes. But in this video, I want to talk about the players that I think had their stock rise and players that I feel like had their stock fall in terms of the first week of preseason. I'm going to do the offense and the defense, of course. And with that being said, we're going to start with defensive players that I think had their stock rise after the game against the Colts. There were quite a few defensive players that jumped off the page in week 1, not to mention the Colts played a majority of their starters for like the entire first quarter, and our 2s and some of our 3s completely shut down Matt Ryan and that offense. It was pretty impressive. Anyway, the first player that I feel like had their stock rise on the defensive side of the ball for the Buffalo Bills is going to be linebacker Terrell Bernard, the 3rd round pick in 2022 out of Baylor. He didn't exactly have a masterclass performance in his NFL debut, but 2 tackles, 1 assist, and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. It was the first touchdown of the Bills season, which is relatively huge in the game. Sticking with linebacker depth, another guy that had a very good game was linebacker Baylon Spector, the 7th round linebacker out of Clemson in the 2022 NFL draft. He had about 10 tackles in this game, a couple of huge special team tackles. He was making gang tackles at the line of scrimmage. He had a really good game. I believe Baylon was the tackling leader for the Buffalo Bills in this matchup. He was flying across the field. He was playing with a ton of confidence. I'm not sure how his path to the roster is necessarily looking like. I would imagine it's not the brightest. If he's able to keep that up over the next couple weeks, who knows? Maybe he squeaks out as a special teamer, as some linebacker depth. We know Andre Smith is suspended for this first 6 games. Not sure if he's going to end up making it with that in mind. But there's still another linebacker that also had himself one hell of a game, and I feel like I hadn't seen his name talked about too much after the fact, but Joe Giles Harris, the 2019 undrafted free agent with the Buffalo Bills, now had one hell of a game in my opinion. Giles Harris had 5 tackles, 1 assist. He had a tackle for loss. He had a quarterback hit, and he had a pass breakup late in the 4th quarter, which was huge at that point. Another guy that I think has a very bleak path to the roster, but with Andre Smith being suspended, you never know. If he's able to prove his worth over the next couple games and really make a statement on special teams, I think Joe Giles Harris has as good of a chance as anybody else. Moving back a level to the secondary, there were quite a few players back here that also had themselves one hell of a game. The entire defense showed out the whole time, if I'm being honest. Starting with 2019 6th round pick Jaquan Johnson in the secondary. The safety had an interception, which was returned for quite a big gain. Not to mention, he was a dog at the line of scrimmage. He was getting physical. And then how about our 6th round pick out of Villanova, Christian Benford? The cornerback had himself one hell of a day as well. He's been getting so much hype coming out of training camp. Everybody had their eyes on him going into this game, and he certainly did not disappoint. He had 2 tackles. He had a massive pass breakup against Michael Pittman. Just watch how physical he gets here.
They're just playing well, no question. Gets a little bit of a jersey pull there, but it's right at the line of scrimmage. Well played. And gets his hand in.
Might have been a little bit of a hold there. They were definitely going back and forth, but Christian Benford just shut down the #1 wide receiver on the Indianapolis Colts. I think that's something to write home about for sure. Kyrie Elam, who also had a massive pass breakup. He had one hell of a game. He got shaken up on a pick route where he ran into another guy of ours. But the 1st round pick out of Florida had a massive pass breakup as well. He was going up against the massive Alec Pierce, the 6'3 wide receiver out of Cincinnati, the 220-pounder. Kyrie Elam is no small guy either, and he went toe-to-toe with him on press coverage.
On this quick slant, hard route to defend, gets there, and that is...
I mean, that was one hell of a pass breakup by Elam. He's playing press on Alec Pierce, who's got the body position, but he's able to fight through and time the play perfectly, so he's not taking an interference penalty. He's able to put his arms in right where Alec Pierce had his hands. Absolutely textbook, beautiful play by the first-year corner, and then the defensive line. The defensive line depth showed out, man. Brandon Bryant, Tim Settle, Boogie Basham, Kingsley Jonathan as well. I mean, we had so many guys getting into the face of the Colts offensive linemen, who, like I said, were a majority of the starters for the first quarter, and we were kind of stuffing toughened their run game. Granted, it wasn't Jonathan Taylor. They still have one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. I mean, our defensive front depth was just chipping away at the Indianapolis Colts offensive line, and we saw that Boogie Basham had the strip sack on Nick Foles, and that's when Terrell Bernard took it back for 6 points. Obviously, I got nothing but good to say about the Buffalo Bills defense in the first preseason matchup. I mean, there was just so much to love about all of the rookies in this draft class, about all these other guys that were stepping up as depth players. They were really making a name for themselves. And although we're on the topic of defense, let's kind of mix in the special teams and just talk about that punt that Matt Araiza had. He's also a holder now, which we all knew he was able to do in the first place, but we were able to see it in action, so we don't have to worry about that. But just take a look at this gorgeous, just absolute bomb of a punt. I mean, I've never seen a punt farther with my own eyes live in my life.
Draft pick, his first punt today. And it's a big one. Wow, look at this, to the 15, and it's a touchback. I mean,
it was an 82-yard punt.
I almost feel bad for Matt Haack. He has absolutely no chance in this competition. If Matt Araiza is just able to figure out the touch, which I think he's going to be able to do, he's going to coffin corner people constantly from all over the field. I think it's safe to say, even after just one preseason game, Matt Araiza has won that job. But those are all the defensive players that I thought had their stock rise in the first week of preseason. I really don't think there's anybody on the defense that played bad enough to have their stock drop. I think the defense played fantastic. Like I said, the Colts had a lot of their ones out there for a majority of the first quarter going into the second, and we were stymieing them completely. It's the first week of football, I understand that, but the Colts starters did not look too great. I'd be concerned a little bit if I was a Colts fan after that. Now let's move on to the offensive side of the ball, the players that I think had their stock rise, and there were a few on the offense as well, and of course we have to start out with wide receiver Khalil Shakir, the 5th round selection out of Boise State. We all knew this guy was shifty. We all knew this guy could be good after the catch, but he showed that he has some great hands. He could play on the outside and in the slot. 5 receptions for 92 yards, and he also fielded 2 punt returns. Didn't show much pop on those punt returns, but there was no hesitation as far as receiving and securing the catch. Khalil Shakir saw 7 touches in this game, including the 2 punt returns, and he just caught it and he secured it instantly. There was no bobble, there was no hesitation, there was no nothing. He's got some very strong hands. He was easily the most trusted wide receiver out on the football field the majority of the time. And like I said, he was seeing work on the outside of the field as well, so we were kind of worried about some outside wide receiver depth issues, but if Khalil Shakir is able to do that, he's 100% going to make this roster. Another receiver that had a great game was Isaiah Hodgins. I'm not sure how his path to the roster is really looking at the moment. I just feel like he's forever going to be trapped down there just because of how good we actually are. 9 receptions, 77 yards for Isaiah Hodgins. He had one hell of a game. This release that he had against one of the Colts cornerbacks was disgusting.
Actually, like I said, this ball is in the air right now, and he runs another 12 yards before it comes.
Isaiah Hodgins is definitely going to make the coaches' lives a lot tougher after that performance. I mean, in that clip right there, you saw that great release off the line, that great route up the sideline, and he went near full extension to make that catch. He had a couple catches over the middle as well, where he had to extend his arms out, catch that ball, and secure it with somebody draped over his back, and he was able to do that and box him out as well. Like I said, not too sure if Isaiah Hodgins has a spot on this roster as of right now, but that was a great first week to make a statement for himself. And how about the 2022 undrafted free agent running back Raheem Blackshear? He stepped in and he was running with a ton of power. He was a great threat out of the backfield. He was also somewhat elusive. He had 6 rushes for 11 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 receptions for 60 yards, and he also fielded 2 kick returns and 1 punt return. That's something you definitely got to be watching out for, man. That return job is completely up in the air for anybody to grab. Unfortunately, I do not think there's a spot on this roster for Raheem Blackshear, if I'm being completely honest. He would have to put 2 amazing games on tape over the next couple of weeks, which of course is possible. The fact that he was fielding kicks and punts definitely makes things a little bit more interesting. The final offensive player that I want to highlight that had their stock rise was Matt freaking Barkley. Who would have thought? Barkley went 18 for 24, 224 yards, an interception that really wasn't his fault, but he also led a game-winning drive as well as just a 14-point comeback in general. As soon as Barkley stepped in, it seemed like the tempo changed completely. They were upbeat. They were all in sync. Matt Barkley looked extremely comfortable in the offense with the receivers around him. He really looked like a leader out there, and he was throwing a bunch of well-timed, fantastically placed passes as well. Matt Barkley really made a competition in terms of the second quarterback spot. I'd be a little nervous if I was Case Keenum, I'm not gonna lie. Now moving on, unlike defense, there were a couple players on the offensive side of the ball where I felt like they had their stock drop personally. Starting with the tight end depth, OJ Howard and Tommy Sweeney collectively. 2 guys combined had 3 targets and 0 receptions. I'm pretty sure Tommy Sweeney had a pretty brutal drop as well. Other than Howard and Sweeney, there's really no other tight ends on this roster that are going to be making this roster and actually having a helpful impact. Quentin Morris, not so much. That rookie tight end Jalen Whittemire, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He didn't even dress, I don't think. Who knows where he was. Hopefully, we're able to straighten that situation out, but tight end depth could be something to watch. Next man up who I think had their stock drop was Case Keenum. Just mentioning about how Matt Barkley had a great week. Case Keenum did not look comfortable back there. As a veteran quarterback behind a brutal offensive line, he did not show much poise whatsoever. 11 for 18 with 86 passing yards and 2 interceptions. The one really was not his fault entirely, although the ball still wasn't placed very well to Jamison Crowder. Like I said, the offensive line wasn't giving him much help, but for a veteran quarterback, I expected him to stand in the pocket a little bit more than he did, but he seemed very anxious, very uncomfortable. He was getting out kind of quick, and the throws he was delivering, they just were not in the best of places. Case Keenum is definitely going to have to put on a better performance next week, or else the quarterback 2 position is going to be up in the air, and that's a little bit concerning considering Matt Barkley's the other guy. Also, we'll throw Jamison Crowder on this list. A couple weeks back, I made my camp battles predictions video, and I had a lot of praise for Jamison Crowder. This first week, he really didn't show very much. He had one target. It went right through his hands from Case Keenum, although it wasn't the best pass like I mentioned earlier. He still definitely should have caught it, but he popped it up right in the air, and it got intercepted. And the last stock down candidate is just the offensive line depth in general. I'm not going to call anybody out specifically, but the offensive line in this game was not good really whatsoever. Nobody in the trenches for our offense really made any sort of an impact. They weren't playing bully ball. They weren't getting too physical. They were getting pushed back right into the laps of our quarterback. Offensive line depth has been something that we struggled with over the last season or two, so I really hope that this doesn't become another red flag for us. But yeah, those are my final thoughts as far as the first week of preseason goes. I'm not the biggest preseason fan, but it was exciting to see football back on the television. Exciting win, 27-24 for the Buffalo Bills. Let me know what players you thought had their stock rise, and let me know what players you think had their stock fall after week 1. Next week, we get the Denver Broncos at home at 1 p.m. I think it's on Saturday, August 20th. I'm really going to start to get back in the swing of things as the football season starts to get back in full swing. But if you enjoyed, as always, please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. If you want to hit the bell to be notified when I upload, I'd appreciate that. And go over to Twitter, follow me over there. I'd appreciate that as well. I have a TikTok down in my description that I think you should check out, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.